You're listening to Talk of Champions, an Ole Miss Spirit podcast with Ben Garrett.
It's time! It's time! It's time! It's time! It's time!
Hello again, friends, and welcome inside the RiverLand Roofing Studios, the little house up top, for an all-new out-of-the-package edition of Talk of Champions. I'm Ben Garrett, at Spirit Ben on Twitter. You've probably seen me at the Ole Miss Spirit for the last 20-ish years, omspirit.com, an affiliate of On3. Sign up today for a subscription. We'd love to have you. It's September 20th, 2024. Happy birthday to my oldest daughter, Gracie, who is 12 on this day. She is a blessing. She is my heart. Happy birthday, Gracie Girly Squirrely. Your dad loves you. Welcome again inside. This is the RiverLand Roofing Studios. If you see me on the street, I meant to say this up top. If you see me on the street, come up to me, say hello. I've got some cards, only a few left, cards for friends and family that could give you, that's got a QR code on it that will give you a deal on a subscription to the Ole Miss Spirit, omspirit.com, an affiliate of On3. I think it's like a really good deal. I can't remember exactly. I don't want to lead you wrong. But find me. If you see me on the street, say, hey, Ben, give me a card. I'll give you a card, but promise me you're going to use it. If you're not going to use it, don't take it from me. That's all I ask. Or make sure the person you give it to does use it. I only got a few of them left. So omspirit.com, sign up for a sub today. See me on the street, ask for a card. I'll set you up, right? You're inside an all-new edition of Talk of Champions. And today, we're talking about the trending and ending storylines for Ole Miss as the Rebels turn to potentially win number 4 against Georgia Southern on Saturday. The number 5 ranked Rebels are 3-0 through 3 games, while Georgia Southern is 2-1. A kickoff on Saturday, 6:45 p.m. Central Time on the SEC Network. The Eagles' only loss, I mentioned this earlier, but let's recap. The Eagles' only loss this season was a 1-point near upset of Heisman candidate Ashton Jeanty and Boise State in their season opener. They bounced back with a 20-17 win at Nevada and a 42-14 win over South Carolina State at home last week. Some players to know, as I listed off earlier this week on Wednesdays, Tuesdays, whenever it was, Talk of Champions, the last one. Quarterback J.C. French has thrown for 776 yards, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions so far this season. So Georgia Southern, as I've looked more into them a little bit, again, I'm no expert, I'm no film junkie, I'm no scouting and development kind of guy. But the one thing that's obvious is I think we're all used to seeing, or we're used to seeing a Georgia Southern, when we associated Georgia Southern in our brain, we used to associate it with a run-heavy variation of something, of an offense. This Georgia Southern team is the best team Ole Miss has played all year. The best team Ole Miss has played through 4 games. That's not saying much because Furman was FCS. Middle Tennessee is in a rough place. But last week was Ole Miss's first Power 4 opponent, and Ole Miss went and whipped them, Wake Forest, on the road so bad, Ole Miss is scrambling to find an opponent to replace Wake. Meanwhile, Wake has gone and decided to travel to Oregon State next year. Rather than go to Oxford, they're going to go to Oregon State. Lane Kiffin said it. It's an unwritten rule in college sports. ADs don't screw over ADs. You just don't do it. Everybody knows what you're dealing with as far as the maddening puzzle that is the solve for your schedule. To do this so late really puts Ole Miss in a crappy bind, but they're exercising all options is what I'm told, including a potential Week 0 game. That'd be fun. What if Ole Miss is like the kickoff game for Week 0? That'd be fun. Anyway, best team Ole Miss has played so far, Georgia Southern. This team, unlike the others too, can challenge Ole Miss vertically and on the perimeter more than any other. And I think that's notable for a number of reasons, not the least of which, what is the number one area of concern so far, or the number one negative trending line for Ole Miss so far through 3 games? Probably that field coverage, secondary coverage, opposite Tre Harris on the boundary. There's just so many holes, some big busts happening. This team can challenge Ole Miss vertically unlike any team they've played so far. And it's not just the quarterback, J.C. French, it's Tyler Fromm. He's a transfer tight end from Auburn, had a 31-yard reception against Ole Miss, actually, back in 2021. He's one of 14 different players with the reception. So this is a big Jaden Kennedy game then. He's played well, better in run support, I think, than pass support. But still, when your PFF grading across the board is still in the 50s, including run support, man, zone, that's just not going to cut it. So this is the first time where Jaden Kennedy's starting, if he's still starting, because we haven't been out there to practice this week. You might see more of a Yam Banks, who surprisingly we haven't seen a ton of so far, or Brandon Turnage, who's got versatility because he's played both, a tremendous amount of snaps at both positions, corner, nickel, or at safety. So maybe you see one or two of them, but for me, for what we know, Jaden Kennedy, we assume, essentially Georgia Southern can attack in a way Ole Miss is about to start seeing a whole lot more of on a weekly basis. SEC play comes around next Saturday, 11 a.m. Central Time inside Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, those Kentucky Wildcats. This is the kind of offense that will really test where Ole Miss is more than the other opponents have so far. I mentioned earlier this week on Talk of Champions how in and around the Manning Center this is the best team Ole Miss has played, and I think that's been reinforced both from what we've heard from the players and coaches this week, and also if you just watch any of Georgia Southern under Clay Helton, which looks very similar to Lane Kiffin, as you'd expect him to, because Clay Helton's from the Lane Kiffin coaching tree. So that'll be fun. Another fun little side note to be paying attention to. Georgia Southern, they only look more challenging the more you look at them. So I'd say it's a trending storyline that Georgia Southern is the best team Ole Miss has played so far. A storyline that's ending is Ole Miss's preseason concern about its running backs room. And it's because of Henry Parrish Jr. He's been exactly what this Ole Miss offense needs from a running back. A one-cut, jump-cutting, vision hound in a similar, if not near identical mold to Zach Evans. He's been great. But more importantly, for the long-term view of the season, he's quickly balanced Ole Miss out offensively. He's third in the SEC in rushing as Henry Parrish, but it's been Matt Jones where Ole Miss has really added a nice developmental feather to its cap, because Matt Jones is a former walk-on, and he adds a dynamic completely different to Henry Parrish and Ulysses Bentley, who are kind of redundancies. He is a Quinshon Judkins build. I didn't want to bring him back up. I had somebody in the YouTube comment said, hey, another video where you brought up Quinshon again. I'm sorry, I didn't want to bring him up. I actually thought of you when I was writing this, but I was like, I got to make the point here. Matt Jones is a Quinshon build. He's the only player outside of like Rashad Amos. Quinshon Judkins, he's been the best of that group. And on the year, Quinshon has 22 carries for 163 yards, 3 touchdowns as the number 2 for Ohio State. He's averaging 7.4 yards per carry. And then there's Matt Jones, 22 carries for 2 more yards, 165, 3 touchdowns, and a 7.5 yards per carry average. Ole Miss is getting the production it was worried it lost, and recruited a Logan Diggs and Rashad Amos and those guys to replace out of Matt Jones. Now, Logan Diggs could come back. I've been hearing for the longest and saying on this podcast that Logan Diggs is, whatever you get from him should be considered bonus. Anytime before the playoffs would be huge, and I think a little bit of a surprise. But we'll see. Matt Jones, though, is making up for his absence as well. He's the one that stepped into that Quinshon is gone role, because Ole Miss did view it more as a balanced with Quinshon number 2. I think they would have treated it this year that way because Quinshon wasn't as efficient last year. Ole Miss was a better offense with Zach Evans operating at peak and Quinshon operating at peak in their roles. So in these roles, Ole Miss no longer has a running game to worry about because Henry Parrish is that Zach Evans. Matt Jones has been as good as Quinshon Judkins. Will it last? Remains to be seen, obviously, and Ole Miss has played no one yet, and Georgia Southern is going to be more challenging than the first 3 weeks. But so far, you can only go by what the games they've played and how they've played those games, how they've won those games, how they've dominated those games, and so far, so good for the running game. Because Matt Jones is adding that between the tackles short yardage component that is missing with Quinshon gone. He's answered the bell with aplomb. And the balance, I think, has been the most encouraging because Ole Miss is averaging 64 points per game. The most in all of college football. Tennessee is second with 60. Ole Miss is also first in offensive yards per game at 713.5. The Rebels have outscored their opposition 168-9. That means no touchdowns, Ole Miss is the first team in SEC history to score 150 points and allow fewer than 10 points through 3 games. But I mentioned Tennessee. A trending Ole Miss storyline is Tennessee being wish-casted into the role that these Rebels are already playing. It just goes to show you, with all the Tennessee love right now and the Ole Miss, well, they got to play somebody. Old stigmas die hard. Ole Miss is number 5 in the country, has a third-year Heisman candidate at quarterback in Jackson Dart. They should be the media darling, which always slobbers over the new. They want the Georgias, the Clemsons. They love that Dabo and Clemson are flailing. Georgia almost losing to Kentucky. Oh, that was media catnip. They love the new. They love to think always it happens, the downfall of the dynasty happening. And I know that Ole Miss traditionally has not been, it's been in the bottom tier of the SEC, but little brother, you media folks, is all grown up, and Tennessee still hasn't won a thing since Philip Fulmer in the 90s. And I agree, Nico is a NFL star quarterback in the making. But he's in his first year starting, while you have proof of concept, which is going to be a theme of this here segment. And remember all the ups and downs with Jackson Dart, that first year for Jackson Dart to where he is now. Are you kind of putting the Tennessee cart before the horse? We remember those bumps with Matt Corral, those interceptions. And Nico's at worst, Matt Corral. He's that good. He's going to be great. He's great right now, but Jackson Dart is proven. And he's ascending in year 3 while Nico is in year 1. But Nico in Tennessee plays cupcakes and the media's just, oh, Tennessee, good old Rocky Top. And I guess I say that with Dolly sitting back right here, you know. But then Dart and Ole Miss outscore their opposition 168-9. Don't give up a touchdown. The first team in the SEC, in SEC history, to score 150 points and allow fewer than 10 points through 3 games. They've done it against these cupcakes, yes, but it's how they've done it against these cupcakes. The same quality of cupcakes as Tennessee. NC State is getting a lot of love for being the name win that Tennessee got, but NC State's proven to not be very good. Ole Miss went on the road against their first Power 4 opponent and didn't play well. Admittedly, didn't play well, and won 40-6 over Wake Forest. And yet, who I think right now is probably about the same as NC State, yet Tennessee. Oh, Tennessee. The only reason I can come up with this wife swap for the media, the national media, not locally, but the national media, is they're still viewed by those gatekeepers as a blue blood because of 90s nostalgia. And I love 90s nostalgia. I miss Are You Afraid of the Dark? But Ole Miss is every bit the blue blood as Tennessee. More so, better right now. It's ridiculous to consider this. Ole Miss has the 3rd most wins in the SEC dating back to 2020. Not Tennessee. Ole Miss after Alabama and Georgia. The new is new, yes, but also not really. Ole Miss has been on this stage. Y'all just refuse to accept it. Accept it. Nico and Tennessee are good. But the fawning. Oh, the fawning.
Protecting homes and businesses from the whims of nature, you need more than just quality materials. You require RiverLand Roofing. Licensed, insured, and certified, RiverLand Roofing offers not only the assurance of excellence, but a tailored approach to your unique structural needs and budget. To learn more about what RiverLand Roofing can do for you and the community, call them at 662-644-4297 or visit riverlandroofing.com.
This is Cali. With C Spire's blazing fast nationwide 5G network, she's got her fans in the palm of her hands. Live streaming her Mississippi blues from her phone wherever she is. To out there wherever they are. Right now, get the latest 5G phone on us. Only at C Spire, customer inspired.
Ole Miss is number 2 nationally in explosive plays. That's plays of 20 or more yards. Ole Miss leads the SEC. Arkansas, Auburn, Tennessee, they're all tied for 5th. They're ascending too. Tennessee's coming, but Ole Miss is there, national leading with a Lane Kiffin offense at Ole Miss. Florida fawning over the possibility that Lane could come and save them. And yet, y'all have the gall after crowning Tennessee before. This isn't the first time in the last 5 years. I'm just saying pop the brakes a little bit. I think they're awesome. I love Nico. He's probably my second favorite quarterback in college football right now. I've been covering that kid since recruiting. He came to Ole Miss on campus. Ole Miss didn't never really have much of a shot with him, but they recruited him. Like, he's going to be a good player, an NFL player, but Ole Miss has proven it so far, and yet the storyline that is trending, Tennessee, those volunteers. I don't get it. Ole Miss star wide receiver Tre Harris tied for first in the country for most receptions of 15-plus yards. He's got 13. Ole Miss is one of 3 teams in the country that hasn't allowed a touchdown. The others, Ohio State and Georgia. Ole Miss has the highest graded defense, 92.8 in football. In all of football, Ole Miss's defense, not its Lane Kiffin offense, its defense is highest graded in football according to Pro Football Focus grading. Miami, Alabama, and Ohio State are after the Rebels. Ole Miss is number 1 in the nation in defensive rushing efficiency. The Rebels haven't allowed a touchdown through 3 games for the first time since 1961. All cupcakes, no doubt about it. Tennessee's played the same caliber of cupcake, and they're not doing what Ole Miss is doing. Yet ESPN this week ranked the 24 teams in college football with the best chance to make the expanded 12-team college football playoff. 5 of the top 6 came from the SEC. Ole Miss was included, but Ole Miss is 5th, tied with Georgia at 70%, while Texas is number 1. Makes sense, 91%, followed by Alabama at 84%, and Jalen Monroe and Kalen DeBoer have proven to be a great pairing. Ohio State, 78%, and then there's Tennessee at 73%. And I know. Ole Miss and Georgia play each other. One of them is going to lose. But right now, it just seems a little rich, a little too rich for my taste. When you look at the schedules, maybe the schedule does help them. It is pretty easy, but not really. They could be in for a real scare this weekend at Oklahoma. To have a better percentage chance than Ole Miss and Georgia, the ESPN FBI, Texas, a 23.3% chance to go undefeated. Ole Miss, 6th, 8.4%. It's that Georgia game on the schedule. But see, then Ole Miss is currently favored by ESPN in each of their remaining regular season games. Even Georgia. Georgia wasn't even listed in ESPN's range of outcomes as far as potential undefeated teams, which is wild if you think about it. Really think about it, because ESPN's just assuming the standard bearer of this sport the last 5 years is going to lose at least one game. So it's happening. Again, ESPN has Ole Miss as a home favorite in November. Tennessee is really good. But again, the same criticisms for Ole Miss. They haven't played anybody. Those are applicable to Tennessee, and yet they're not being applied equally. But you got to give the Volunteers their credit. They deserve their credit. And I am a fair and balanced Ole Miss homer, apparently. Tennessee's first in scoring margin, but then you got Ole Miss and Ohio State both tied for second at plus 53. And DraftKings this week releases its top 10 Heisman winner odds. And Cam Ward, the one-time Ole Miss transfer target, talked to him when he came to campus 3 Decembers ago, really felt like he was close to becoming the next Ole Miss quarterback. The quarterback Ole Miss signed that transfer class, but then they let him walk, and Jackson Dart becomes their quarterback a couple months later, and the rest is history. He leads the list for Miami, plus 550. Jackson Dart is tied for second at plus 700 with Jalen Monroe. Nico Imlieva was 4th, plus 850. Dylan Gabriel, another one-time Ole Miss transfer target when Jeff Lebby was here, got Dylan Gabriel to campus. He's number 5 for Oregon, plus 900. Georgia's Carson Beck notably tumbled to number 6 after Kentucky, plus 1,200. Dart's in a tie for the third best Heisman odds according to ESPN Bet. He and Nico both sit at plus 800. Ole Miss since 2020 has finished first or second in the SEC in rushing every single year, but won in 2023 last year. Sean, when the Rebels were 5th. I'm just saying to the national media types that aren't watching, but should, save some of your Tennessee energy for Ole Miss. And I know that's really hard for a lot of you, because a lot of you Y'all had the worst kind of pitchforks at the ready and torches at the ready back in 2016, ready to just bury Ole Miss, and yet here they are. Number 5 in the country. I know, it's a bitter pill to swallow. Just give some of your Tennessee energy to Ole Miss. It's proven. It's proof of concept. Another storyline, unfortunately still trending only because Florida fans really want to make fetch happen, is the Lane Kiffin in Florida stuff. And I appreciated ESPN's Reese Davis and On3's JD Pickle both this week coming out and saying the obvious, stating the obvious, what I stated on this podcast weeks ago, and figured correctly Florida fans would be calling me a homer for it. Ole Miss is a better job right now than Florida. It is a better job. You just got to simply look at the facts objectively. I don't think Lane's leaving Ole Miss for Florida. I don't know, but that's how I feel today. But I just want to briefly consider the worst case scenario, that Lane did leave. If it's Florida, if it's the NFL, we do this every single year. Ole Miss is not new to this conversation, but never has it been better positioned organizationally to keep the train rolling down the track. Ole Miss isn't all about Lane Kiffin anymore. Full program autonomy, but if he did make that move, what is the worst thing that would happen, possibly? It's not like Ole Miss is resetting. The worst case scenario, because again, this is the last week before SEC play. The cupcakes are over with. It's just ball now, all gas, no brakes. But the worst case scenario, like if Hugh Freeze would have left for Florida, like he really almost did, no matter what he tries to tell anybody, he almost left Ole Miss for Florida. Yeah, that would have been a complete reset, but Lane Kiffin leaving, what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, if you look at it on paper, it doesn't look so scary. Pete Golding's probably promoted to head coach. Now, you can quibble about that, say, well, I want a full-on search. Okay, but the most likely outcome in that scenario is because of the truncated schedule, especially if Ole Miss is in the playoffs, in the title chase, it'll be really late before Lane would go anywhere, NFL, wherever it might be. So with the schedule alone, and based on continuity and keeping the show the operation operating at peak, the most likely outcome in this hypothetical that I do not think is going to become reality, Pete Golding becomes the head coach. He's promoted to head coach. Brian Brown becomes defensive coordinator, primary play caller, stepping up in his place. Zach Arnett, who's currently an analyst, former defensive coordinator at State under Mike Leach, he steps into Brown's co-DC role. I'm not saying it plays out exactly like that, but like some amalgamation of that is the worst case scenario. Does that sound so scary? It's not very scary. Here are the facts. Ole Miss is a top 5 program in contention for a national championship in 2024. The ceilings that once existed for the Ole Misses of the world, they no longer exist with the advent of NIL and Ole Miss's proactive approach to it. But even if you want to get more in the weeds, Chris Kiffin is building a house. Chris Kiffin, who was thrown under the bus back in that NCAA stuff, just like Barney Farrar was. He's the one that was listed about the Laramie stuff, the sleeping on the couch that seems, as it always was, so pathetically small and vindictive of a backwards-ass organization, the NCAA, to use that to try to destroy a team that dared to say, yeah, we want to win too. You had idiots at rival schools writing books about this. And yet, despite all of it, Ole Miss is sitting right here, and Chris Kiffin has come back to Oxford to join his brother, and he's building a house. They're laying down roots. But again, and also, the daughter at Ole Miss, son coming to play quarterback at Oxford High. He's in his 5th year when no one expected that. 3 at the most, and that's for the most optimistic of an Ole Miss fan. Alabama's come open. LSU, Florida, Miami, Auburn, all have come open. He's still here. Give it a rest. But if the worst does happen, is Pete Golding as your head coach and Brian Brown as your DC? Sounds scary. Yeah, maybe Charlie goes with Lane as the offensive coordinator, but okay, Pete will just go get his own offensive coordinator. It's just not what it used to be. Hugh Freeze leaves for Florida. Whoa! Explosion. I mean, that's the atomic bomb. But again, don't take my word for it about Florida being a better job. Here is Reese Davis. College Game Day's Reese Davis saying what I've been saying. Florida fans, it ain't me being a homer.
I'm going to say this is going to throw some cold water on Florida and probably help Lane. As I said earlier, I'm not the biggest fan about this, but you also can't ignore the obvious. And you also can't ignore the obvious and pretend that they won't go after Lane Kiffin. As we stand here or sit here right now, Lane Kiffin has a better job right now. He is at best making a lateral move. And it's not because Ole Miss is better than Florida right now. It's because they can get in on players now. They're aligned with their NIL. He makes the decisions. He's in charge. Lane has a better.
A couple of Ole Miss football notes to take us out. Juice Wells, the transfer wide receiver from South Carolina, crossed 3,000 career receiving yards last week against Wake Forest. He entered the weekend in the top 10 in the SEC in receiving yards. He's outside of the top 10 now, but 2 of the top 7 receivers in the SEC as ranked by yards are league leader Tre Harris at 403 and second-year Ole Miss Rebel Caden Lee, my guy, at 225. Breakout player of the year for Ben. Chris Poopaw, the transfer linebacker from Arkansas, had the 4th highest linebacker grade, 84.4 in college football last week. According to Pro Football Focus, what an addition Chris Poopaw has been, and criminally has not been talked enough by me because he has been the dude for Ole Miss on defense. His 91 defense grade tied for first, 90.6 run defense grade tied for fourth. This is nationally. 86.4 coverage grade is sixth. 19 tackles through 3 games, 6 pressures, 4 tackles for loss of pass breakup. Chris Poopaw, we see you. Talk of Champions, RiverLand Roofing, the Ole Miss Spirit, we see you. Chris Poopaw, keep doing your thing. And that'll do it for an all-new edition of Talk of Champions, as always, powered by RiverLand Roofing and the Ole Miss Spirit. That's omspirit.com for all your roofing needs. Text or call RiverLand Roofing today at 662-644-4297. That's 662-644-4297. Visit them online at riverlandroofing.com. Ole Miss and Georgia Southern Saturday, 6:45 p.m. Central Time. SEC Network. Sign up for subscription to the Ole Miss Spirit today. We're taking you all the way to kickoff and well beyond. We'll see you after the game. I think it's going to be Monday morning this week for the post-game show. Shows are going to be from Talking Champions now coming Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So you'll get Zach's recruiting shows on Tuesdays and Thursdays, unless Bradley Sal shows back up for the post-game show, which is still TBD. Pressure him. Got to keep the pressure on. If you see him in the street, don't ask for an Ole Miss Spirit card like you will with me. Say, hey, get off your butt and go join Ben on the podcast. We miss you. He's this close, but he's still dragging. But until then, until I see you on probably Monday, maybe Sunday, we'll see how it works out, but Monday's the plan. Until then, take care of each other. Be good to each other. Happy birthday, my beautiful daughter, my 12-year-old oldest baby, Gracie. I love her so much. She is my heart. As Riley is my spirit, my youngest. I love them so much. Take care of each other. God bless.